this thing, the New World Order. Okay, we hear that a lot, don't we? Everybody's talking about the New World Order. We're all going to get changed and go and move into the New World Order. All right, but the thing is, right, there is no New World Order. Okay, right, we are ruled now still by the Holy Roman Empire. Right, we have been for thousands of years, and it is the old world order. So, you know, I know the politicians say these things, New World Order and build back better type of stuff. But in reality, it's still the old world order. It is and always has been. Now, I'm taking this to the City of London. Now, I hope, well, a lot of people know you have your three centres. The City of London. Now, I'm not talking about London. I'm talking about the City of London, the 1.2 square mile, Washington, D.C., and the Vatican. The three centres that rule the world, but it's ruled by a different place. All right? So you got your three centres, but ruled by a fourth centre, which has the influence, the little puppet strings that control them all. So we're talking now today, though, really, I want to talk about about London. The City of London. So we're talking about England. Let's say we're looking all the way back, all right, from the Holy Roman Empire, which before it was just the Roman Empire, which eventually became the Holy Roman Empire, right? But we're looking at 56 BC, Julius Caesar, he invades England, right down in southern England. Now, why on earth, when you think about it, Julius Caesar is coming all the way from Italy to invade England? Now, England, like 90% of the time, is grey and it's cold and it's wet and it's miserable. And they're not going to be landing there knowing that whatever, you know, mineral, like sort of like was available there, or any natural resources that were there, because they didn't know it was there. Or at least did they or did they? I don't know about that. You know, there's a lot of weird things that do go on, we know. But, you know, if we to believe what they're saying, so they go and invade at 56 BC into this horrible grey wet land without knowing anything about it. And you're coming from like a really warm Mediterranean climate with like, you know, no problem with like food, water and warmth. All right. Would it be me? It certainly wouldn't be me. I would be staying in Italy. You know, so it doesn't really make sense. But anyway, it wasn't very successful. Okay, don't know if you know that or not, but he wasn't very successful. When he landed, one of the first things he did is actually fell over. So this is written. I mean, obviously it's the Chronicles and we have to read it and decide. But he fell over, fell down on the pebbles, right? I'm sure they said it was the pebbles on there. And what he done is he, you know, because he knew that was the omen would have been bad. So he grabbed a hold and he stood up and he said something along the lines. I remember it from the lectures, and said, look, I've just landed and now I've already got handfuls of this land. Okay, so turned it around, as like fell over and made it a positive rather than a negative. Very clever man. So look, he's gone from 56 BC when Julius Caesar invaded to 43 AD when they invaded and conquered. Is that right? Big difference, you know. So they actually invaded and conquered and stayed for hundreds of years in 43 AD. And that was led by General Aulus Plautius. Okay. Now, what they did, they sailed over on the Dover Straits. Obviously, it's the shortest route between Europe and England. And the landing on the bottom next to Dover, I can't remember the other. There's three places where they landed. Obviously, you're going over on these ships. You know, they didn't have, you know, satellite navigation them days, or at least we don't know, but probably did not. So they've landed in three places, and the three ships, or sorry, the three groups, but all around Dover. So like Dover in the middle, and there was one on either side of them. They didn't land in London. Okay, this is the point I'm making. So they've landed there in Dover, all along that southern coast, and obviously the first thing they're going to do is like protect themselves and make sure they're not going to get, you know, killed on the beaches and everything like that. So they're going to secure themselves. But it didn't take them very long before what they wanted to do was move up to London. All right, that was where they were going from the beginning, and it's where they created their capital. For that, they were wanting that. They needed that point. The same as when, you know, there was, I'm saying we've got the three centers, but the one in America, Washington, D.C., why is it that when they've landed over on the East Coast, which is where they landed, did they have to go all the way to Washington to set the capital up and build the obelisk? The same as what they've got the obelisk in the Vatican and the obelisk in London, or the City of London. All right, they've known this and knew this and wanted this from the beginning. Okay, that's the point I'm trying to make. Now, obviously, they've invaded a new country, so they're not going to be able to do things overnight, and they're trying to take over the whole thing. So it's 4 years later, all right, looking at 47 AD, and the same guy, though, that General Aulus Plautius, now he founded Londinium, all right, and then when he founded Londinium, when he actually set it up, he was replaced very quickly, for whatever reason we'll never know, by, right, Publius Ostorius Scapula. Okay, now he continued, though, developing Londinium as the capital, fortifying it, building up, making it a merchant capital. And what is it now? This is like 2022. It's the merchant capital of the world. He was developing it as the merchant capital even back then. When the Romans were running a riot and doing all this stuff, everybody, like all the history books that I can remember, always said what a fantastic military sort of like machine that the Roman army was and the Roman military were. And I'm not saying they're wrong. They were very regimented, they were very disciplined, and they were very good at what they did. And now you'll all know the shield walls that they had, and they had their big shields that were kind of rounded. And what they would have is hold it in the left, have the sword in the right, and they would always attack at angles like this, angles. So you wouldn't be fighting straight on, whereas what the normal Germanic tribes and the British tribes, if you want to call them that, well, they weren't at the time, but let's just say that to keep it easy, you know, they would fight straight on. The Romans would have the shields interlocked and then open the shields, stab out at an angle and close it again. So very disciplined in that way. But the biggest thing that you've ever find when you look, and I'm talking about Hannibal, right? For instance, when he actually invaded Italy and Rome, and they were saying that they were far better than him. Well, they really weren't. He was a genius, a military genius, and he nearly defeated them completely, and the only one through being devious. Spying, and that all of these people, whenever it happened, they always beat them from the inside. Apart from Boudica in England, which I think just that she was just in such a bad mood that she actually made terrible mistakes after she had destroyed everything, though. So Boudica, right, when I was younger in school, they always called her Boadicea, and it was a change the name later on. So Boudica, she destroyed or virtually destroyed London, you know, when she had her uprising. And, you know, I think the story goes along that she was raped and her daughters were raped by these Roman soldiers. So her revenge was to go out and literally destroy the Roman army. So, but the thing is, obviously, in the end, she was defeated, and the rebellion was defeated by Gaius Suetonius Paulinus. And when he had defeated the Boudica rebellion, then he reinforced London, or Londinium, as it was then, and it remained the capital, their capital, the Romans' capital in Britain until 410 AD, when they started to pull back and go back to the continent. Okay, it's a long time. So, but you know, the whole thing is from the beginning, they were always aiming, always trying to get onto or into London. Took them a couple of years to get there, 4 years or whatever, but they stayed there and developed it as a merchant capital, which again, like I've just said before, it still is, well, it is now the merchant capital of the world. Now, I just want to touch on something, right, which I think was very interesting, okay? So the main Roman army would have been under one cult or religion, And in Londinium, it would have still been mainly at the time the Roman soldiers, not the auxiliaries, which would have been from the different countries. Okay, the main religion was the cult of Mithras. Mithras. Now, there's a lot of arguments to and from, and I've looked at both sides, and I can agree with both sides. So I'm just going to tell you what they argue about, okay? So you can make your own mind up and do some more research for yourself. So the legends are, okay, which is all legends. Nobody can know unless you were there. All right, Mithras, he was said to have been born of a virgin, okay, on the 25th of December. All right, and his birth was supposed to have been witnessed by shepherds. All right, so, you know, and this was 400 years before Jesus Christ, by the way. And this was, he was born, definitely, like, it was, all the religion was about 400 years before Jesus Christ. That is definite. Now, Mithras was considered to be a great teacher and a master, and he was supposed to have traveled the lands teaching people, and he was always accompanied by his 12 followers, which could have been called disciples. All right, but he always promised all who followed him immortality. Okay, and he was supposed to have performed miracles as well. It was more of a soldier's religion, and the top, which sounds a bit very Masonic, right? The top people were all taken into secret societies and secret meetings, and they would have secret sacrifices, supposed to have been young bulls, you know, and they would like smother themselves and drink the blood. And, you know, that is true, that part. You know, so I don't know if it was the bull or if it was different or whatever it was, but that was what it was. And these were the high up sort of like 33rd, like, Masonic people and above, right? But a lot of the soldiers, the normal level soldiers, would have still like worshipped Mithras as their god. Now, as I've just said, right, the Roman Empire started to pull back, and it pulled back from Britain from 410 AD, moving right back, consolidating themselves more obviously around Rome and around like Italy, but the Holy Roman Empire, like, was created by Constantine, the emperor Constantine. I'm going to chat about him in a second. But then it disappeared as well. So the Holy Roman Empire. So I'm just talking about the 25th of December, and I wanted to bring this up because I thought it was very interesting how the 25th of December, like, kept tying into things. So, and it brings into line as well these popes, which I always want to talk about, because they're interfering in everything, these popes, all the time. All right, these popes have got their noses stuck into all the business for reasons as well that hopefully you already know. But on the 25th of December, Christmas Day, 800 AD, okay, and you've got Pope Leo III. Now, he crowned and made Emperor Charlemagne the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Now, the Holy Roman Empire had been gone for about 300 years. Okay, so like Constantine, when he was the actual Roman Empire, and he became a Christian, so he turned it into the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, he wanted to be it called that. So but you know, it had sort of like gone back, the same as all these empires before the Crown Corporation, which some people say the British Empire, but it's not. It's the Crown Corporation. You know, the ones like the Mongol Empire and stuff like that. You know, it dissipates, it collapses, which so did the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, but it started to get re-established through this Pope Leo, who's actually doing it through the Emperor Charlemagne. Now, Charlemagne, he was actually a king anyway. And Pope Leo wanted, obviously, a little bit of favor, let's say, and protection and everything from Charlemagne. But, you know, they created again and rebirthed, if you want, this Holy Roman Empire kind of idea. Now, the Holy Roman Empire, since then, since this 800 AD, and Charlemagne was very powerful, very strong character, and ruled everything. But once he'd gone, what they did, they suffered from like civil wars, okay, for centuries. And it was like, honestly, Like they were always fighting and killing each other for a long time. Everybody wanted supremacy. And it stayed that way for hundreds of years, right up until 962 AD, all right, when you had Otto I. Now, he was the king of Germany, Otto I, but then he was also crowned, okay, as the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in 962 AD. So from 800 to 962, there was a lot of, and not straight away from 800, but once they got rid of Charlemagne, right up until 962, it was very tumultuous, very much in civil war and everything, and it was settled down by Otto I. A lot of times, people will say that the Holy Roman Empire was founded by Otto I in 962 AD, but it was started in reality by this Pope Leo guy, and he did it by crowning Charlemagne. Which was already a powerful king, but he made him emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in 800 AD, Christmas Day, 25th of December. Now, this is something I've always found very interesting. The empire, right, the Holy Roman Empire, covered most of Italy and a lot of Europe and little parts of Asia. Constantinople, Constantine, right, Emperor Constantine, all right, that was the capital. Right, and obviously Constantinople was founded by Emperor Constantine, hence the name. Okay, oh, it says there after Emperor Constantine. All right, but what it is, no matter how much of Europe it took in, all right, or Italy it took in, it never ever took any part of Venice at all. Venice was always left as independent, always. Why is Venice always left independent? It's amazing. Well, hopefully you do know, but like Venice just controls it all. The Venetians who settled in Venice, all right, who were the Phoenicians, right, which can go back to the Khazarians and the Canaanites, all right, did not get taken in by the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, now the thing is about the Holy Roman Empire and the Romans, if you think back, it's all about eagles, isn't it? And on the Holy Roman Empire, it's a double-headed eagle facing one way and the other. And there's loads of theories and everything like that, but everything is about eagles. Now, if you look at them when they've gone over to the United States, well, let's just say it's called the United States now, but when they've went that far to the west and they've taken the United States or America, and it's all about the eagle, isn't it? Everything that they have is about the eagle in the United States. And the Holy Roman Empire is the eagle, the double eagle facing out. Now, it's very Masonic. A lot of these symbols on the Masons is about eagles as well. And they even used it, look, in the CIA, right? And also in the moon landing. The eagle has landed, okay? Talking about the moon landings, which, you know, you can make your own mind up if you think that there. You know, and I'm not saying anything right now because it's a different video. All right. But just the whole thing's tying in. Now, also, when we're talking about the CIA, talking about like the eagles and in the United States, if you look at the White House and you look at the Senate building, anything like that, I mean, all looks like Rome, doesn't it? They've actually created the whole thing as if it looks like Rome. So these are not coincidences. Someone didn't just get up in the middle of the night and go, do you know what? I'm going to create this thing that looks like Rome from thousands of years ago, even though this is like, you know, and they're supposed to be of like, you know, the founding fathers and all of this, you know, they're wanting to escape from this despotic king and queen type of thing and the royal family, which is what they were supposed to be doing, escaping and fighting against like King George and all of that to set up freedom and being a free people. So, oh, I've got a good idea. To be a free people, let's go and make everything look like Rome when they were under an emperor and everybody was hammered down by this emperor of Rome. Doesn't really make sense much to me anyway. Eh? Now, I had just touched on this before, so I'll go over it again. So, like the Holy Roman Empire, HRE, that's what I'm saying, being lazy. The Holy Roman Empire, it never ever touched Venice and it didn't put its stamp on Venice. You know, the Venetians, they are the rulers of the world. They are the rulers of everything. And they do it through the three centers, and I had mentioned that before as well. The first one is the Vatican, okay? which is in Rome. The Vatican, obviously, the Holy Roman, the holy part is coming from the Vatican, supposed to be from the well, it's Christianity, but it's Catholic now. All right, from there now it's a state. Okay, the Vatican, right? It is not a city. It is not a building. It is a state. It is a country of its own. The same as London City. I don't know if you've ever been down that way, but you go in and, like, you know, you'll notice when you actually cross the border, they've got dragons, like I think it's in four corners, facing out, all right, from the city of London, okay, in the middle of London, because that's not the same thing. And even the police have a different uniform, and the Queen's not allowed to just walk in. She has to be specially invited in as a foreign ruler from a foreign state, because it is a state of its own, the City of London. I can't understand, or I cannot comprehend, I should say, why people don't think that that's weird. Why is that? Well, that just does not make sense if you're talking about normal and having a country, which I don't think borders are normal either, by the way. But right, in reality, you've got like the City of London in the middle of London, in the middle of England, and it's not part of England, not part of the UK or anything. Does that really make sense? The same as the Vatican, okay? But even in Washington, DC, it is a state of its own. It is not part of the United States of America or America, or whatever way you want to describe it. And I'm going to do more videos on how the United States was kind of deceived and everything later on. And it's a lot to do about the money system. All right. But like, look, so you've got 3 different centers and 3 different states that are not part of the country that they're in. It is strange. Okay. So the Venetians, they rule it though through the Vatican. It's all ruled through the Vatican. And a lot of the popes, okay, the names, many of them were Venetians. We're going to go over the names and everything. And it all comes from the 13 families. And they're all controlled by the 13 tribes or 13 families. Some people call it one or the other, tribes or families. So whichever one you like, you can use. Now, a lot of them were controlled. A lot of them were from the family, but if they weren't from the family, they were controlled by them. So it was probably related, blood related, a different name, but always controlled by the Venetians. So let's jump from Venice over to England then, and the City of London. So there was a disaster. Could you call it something? It was a disaster, all right, in 1066, the 5th of January, 1066, right? The Venetians, they lost the bloodline of the City of London. Okay, how did they do that? What happened? Well, it was King Edward III, and they called him Edward the Confessor. Called him Edward the Confessor, because he was always kneeling down in church, praying and confessing his sins, which couldn't have been many, because that's all he was ever doing. You know, probably like confessing he stood up too quickly. Right, so he didn't have any heirs, because instead of like creating heirs, he was praying. All right, you know what I mean? So anyway, he died without an heir because he was too busy doing his confessions. And now there's a little bit of like controversy about this, depending on which line you want to go down. But you know, I do like to have sort of like more proof of it. Right, so I always like, when I'm thinking about like how to say things, I always think I like Rice from Rice TV, and he always likes to show you the proof. So we do know though that Harold Godwinson, who was a Saxon, was voted in as king. He was voted in by the Wiccan, by the Saxons in their Saxon way. That is what happened. So if there was a problem with, like, say, which is another story about about Camlin, right, which is about like the Welsh, all right, who like with the British, you know, not getting in the Treaty of Camlin, but I can't find anywhere to tie it in. So I do know Harold Godwinson, he was voted in as king by the Wicked. That did happen. That was the Saxon way, because he had died without the heir. All right, now Edward III. Okay, who was the confessor? He was a half brother to, I'm going to try and say this properly, Arthur Canute. Arthur Canute. All right, the King of Norway, the King of Denmark, and at one time the King of England until 1042. All right, or at least, anyway, and when Harold Godwinson was voted king, right, his brother Tostig, he joined forces with Harald Hardrada, King of Norway. Tying in with this, I'm going to explain it in a second. Now, Tostig, he was just jealous. He was the brother. He was the brother of Harold, and he had been exiled, you know, and they were falling out and everything like that. So he was jealous, and Hardrada was the ancestor of King Canute, and King Canute was the father of Arthur Canute. Okay, have you heard of King Canute or Canute the Great? Now, he ruled all down the eastern side of Britain, let's say. Okay, from Northumbria right at the top, just below Scotland, all the way down. King Canute. Now, he was supposed to have sat on the shores and try to tell the waves to stop washing over his feet, but they did wash over his feet. But I think the point was that everybody thought he was so great, and he was. He was a brilliant, well, you know, murdered everybody, killed everybody to be the king. But, you know, he was supposed to have been like a, you know, a very intelligent and very clever man. And I think what he was doing was showing them, look, this is silly. I am not that good. And he let the waves roll over him, right? So if you ever heard of that story, or is it just an English thing? I'm not really sure. But King Canute was supposed to have stopped the waves, and it didn't work, and it washed over him. But I do think from my research that he was doing it to prove a point that he was still just a man. Now, as we'd said, in 1066, they lost the bloodline because of the voted a Saxon into this being in charge of the city of London. All right, if you're in charge of England, you're in charge of the city of London. So you've got this guy, though, which was like Tostig, which is the brother that's had his nose like put out. So what he's done is he's joined forces with Harald Hardrada, who's the Norwegian king. And they've joined together, and they've wanted to come and invade to get rid of Harold, with the O, Harold Godwinson. So what they've done is they landed and they defeated a small, hastily gathered army, and that was called, and this is in 1066. You see, this is what I want to say this for, because everyone talks about, oh, the Battle of Hastings, and it was down in Hastings, which it wasn't. And it was in 1066. There was 3 battles very quickly. 3 battles very quickly that year. Or nearly that. I think it's all that month. All right. But anyway, so they landed at a place called Fulford, which is near York in the north of England. Now, the Saxon army, because it wasn't English, it was Saxon. It was led by Edwin of Mercia, because these were all different kingdoms. Mercia was a different kingdom, and Morcar, he was the Earl of Northumbria, which is a different kingdom. They weren't all together, really. Okay? Now, they suffered heavy losses because they had this huge Viking army of 10,000 that had arrived in Fulford. So they met that army there, completely annihilated, and they did, you know, get like a very, very, very bad losses. So obviously they got messengers going backwards and forwards. So Harold Godwinson, who's now king as well, right? Now he marched straight up to East Riding, is what it's called, in Yorkshire, not far from Fulford, because it's still in Yorkshire, all right? But then they had another battle there, and he killed both his brother. He killed his brother Tostig. Maybe it's not him himself, but like his army did, and Hardrada. And that was called the Battle of Stamford Bridge, okay? So on the first time, right, when you've got it, it's the 20th of September, the first battle. And then this Battle of Stamford Bridge is on the 25th of September, just 5 days later, right? And straight there, 5 days later, they've had 2 battles, all right? This one, though, second one was Harold Godwinson's own army. But it was a big battle. They had 10,000 men. Now, he did win it, but he lost a lot of his own men. He lost a lot of his top fighters at that battle before meeting William. Okay, so he was having a bit of a hard time. So he's had the 20th of September fight. He wasn't there, but his men were, like, in a way it is. Then he got Stamford Bridge, which he won, and slaughtered and burnt all of the ships. I don't know if you ever heard the story. He burnt the ships and everything, stopped them escaping, and that's how he killed his brother and Hardrada, Harold Hardrada. And that was on the 25th of September. But then, right, and this is in York, okay, or Yorkshire, so like quite high north, south of me where I live, right, but way up north, especially from the southern coast of England. So he's marched straight back down to a place called Pevensey, not Hastings, Pevensey, and he met William, and it was on the 28th September, with the next battle. So he's had the battle on the 20th September, then he's had the battle on the 25th of September there, and then the next one on the 28th of September. And all these Normans, right, who are French, who come from Norway, so it's like the Northmen moved to France by their leader called Rollo, or I think it's Rollo, R-O-L-L-O, definitely spelling, but I don't know if you call it Rollo, but it was Rollo. And he had moved down and they made Normandy, Northman, Normandy. And then William was the Duke of Normandy then. So he was an ancestor of Rollo. So this is why it was called Normandy, and then they invaded from there. So literally, if you think about it, in 600, I think it was 600 AD, the north where we live here, right, just over there is all of the it's called Holy Island. And all of Northumbria and Babenberg, which is now Bamborough Castle. Babenberg was the castle, wasn't a castle at the time, it would have been a wooden fort. All of that was rampaged by Vikings from Norway and Denmark, Vikings, all right? And then, like, literally, like, all those years later, it's happening again, because they're still, even though they're French and they've settled in France, but they're still Vikings. They're still Normans. They're still Vikings that have settled in France, and they called it Normandy, all right? And they've invaded again and did it again, okay? Now, the thing is, though, this is the thing. It's these bloody popes again. So we've got William, right? He was sent into battle carrying, right, the flag and the seal of Pope Alexander II. Why? I mean, it's always the popes interfering on these things and creating these things. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the popes later. Now, I think I've probably got this later on in the presentation, but there's proof there that they went in carrying the seal and the flag of Pope Alexander II. These guys came and invaded England thinking they were on a holy crusade, just like the crusades that you've heard about when they, from England and Europe, and they went over to the Holy Land, as they called it. They thought they were on a crusade as well. All right, now I had just mentioned that there. So the Northman, all right, the soldiers, they thought that they were on a crusade, a holy crusade, all right? And then if they did die, then they were going straight to heaven. Well, I can think of better things to doing, but there you go. So they thought that they were going to, if they did die in this battle to win some kind of holy war under the Pope's banner, then they were going straight to heaven. Now, if you look at the Bayou Tapestry, now I've actually seen this. I mean, the Bayou Tapestry, I can't say I've seen the flags, but on the Bayou Tapestry, it clearly shows Pope Alexander II's flag being carried into battle, okay, right? So it shows it on there, and I'm sure they've got two scenes. Now, if you don't know what that is, the Bayou Tapestry, a tapestry that literally, imagine that you were going to make a painting. In them days, they didn't make a painting, they sewed it. They actually did it with sewing. And they made the Bayou Tapestry, and it clearly shows the big flag, Pope Alexander II, getting carried into the battle. So, this is something that is amazing. Many of the Saxon, and the word Saxon, now you can call them English, all right, we understand what you mean, but they were Saxon, and the nobility, the ones that were leading the army, the generals or the ones that owned the land, they were the nobles of the land, the lords, or whatever you want to call them. And when they knew they were losing, what they were going to do, they were going to lose the land, they knew it, and they were going to probably get killed because they wanted rid of them. They knew the French, the Normans, whatever you want to call them, would get rid of them and replace them with their own. So the nobility fled, right? And what they did is they joined the Varangians. That is a word that they used in that part of the world, in the Byzantine Empire, for Vikings, funnily enough, right? But these weren't Vikings, they were the opposite of it. But they joined the Varangians in Constantinople, right, which is the capital of the Byzantine Empire. So on this battle in 1066, when they started to, obviously the battle happened and it went on for a long time. It wasn't just over in a day. You know, it went on and on and on and on, you know, for years as well in different parts of the country. And, you know, but what these did, they could see it was going downhill, and they fled left, and they actually went, you know, back to the very beginning. Can you remember when we're talking about the Constantinople and the Holy Roman Empire, now called the Byzantine Empire? Right? Okay. Funnily enough, right? And it was the capital, Constantinople. It's the capital of the Byzantine Empire. And it was also the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. It's still the same thing, right? So they actually fled what they were fighting to join the thing that was fighting them. And funnily, but it's true, all right? So then you had what they called them William I of England, right? He was William the Conqueror. I forgot the M, look. William the First of England. And now he was a tyrant. Everybody does know that, and I haven't put the H on properly out of the way. He was a tyrant. He was terrible. Now he destroyed where I live, right? Where now the north of, I'm talking about from York, which is probably about an hour and a half drive south to me. I can see the border of Scotland, the Cheviot Hills. From where I live. Obviously, it takes about an hour to get up that way to Scotland. But from York up to there, he destroyed it. He destroyed it because they stood up against him. And when I say destroy it, right, it was, well, look, see, it's written down there. It was called, I don't know if you can read my writing, it was called the harrying of the North, Harrying, harrying of the North. You can go and research it yourself. He destroyed the place. It was a scorched earth policy. He wanted rid of everyone. So they killed men, women, children, animals, everything. If there was something in his way, he burnt it down so that he wouldn't get the troops from the other side coming back to get crops or food or anything. He just destroyed everything. Okay, so, you know, he was known as a tyrant. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because he never harmed the city of London in any way whatsoever at any time from 1066 going onwards, ever. Okay, right? And he too, remember Charlemagne, what I said about the 25th of December? William I, it's what he was called. All right, he too was crowned on Christmas Day, the 25th of December, just like Charlemagne, when Charlemagne was crowned the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in 800 AD by Pope Leo III. All right, so was he, William I, of Christmas Day, right, in 1066. The reason why I'm talking about what he didn't harm London, because in 1086, right, I don't know if you might have known this, but in 1086, William, he created something that was called the Doomsday Book. It might be Domesday, but it's pronounced the Doomsday Book. I remember learning about this at school. Now, the Doomsday Book, what he did was he had, it's a census, literally. I mean, I bet you've been involved in one recently, right? We had one a couple of years ago, and I just told them to get out or didn't fill nothing in. But right? They did the census, and he did a census. This is the Doomsday Book, was the first one ever. So they got to know of every single thing, of every single bit of worth in the entire country, from right up where I am all the way down to the very bottom, and how it was involved in tax, how he could tax it, what his wealth was worth. Now remember, he's divided the whole country up. He's divided the country up to all of the people and awarded it to all of the people who helped him win the crown of England. So he's helped him kill Harold Godwinson. Here where I live, we have a huge big hall, a big house called Delaval Hall, Delaval, and the little village next to it is called Seaton Delaval. But it's from the de Laval family, which is a French de Laval. And all of this land was awarded to them in the north by William. Okay, and he did the same in every single part of England where he had got rid of the nobles, with the Saxons, but English nobles. Okay, so you understand what I'm talking about. And remember, a lot of them had fled because they knew what was going to happen. So they went to the Byzantine Empire to join the Varangians, right? And then they were fighting as mercenaries all around the Holy Roman Empire. They were actually helping the people who had actually beat their army. Isn't that madness? But anyway, I'm going off. But on the Doomsday Book, they had actually like literally recorded every bit of wealth and how he could tax it. Everything was recorded except the City of London. Nothing was ever put down about the City of London. It was always protected. It was taken over to protect it, and then they were protecting it by doing that. Okay? Right. So now we want to bring in, like, I'm still talking about popes. This is all about the City of London. It's all about England. It's all about the popes, the Vatican, and how they interfered with everything. So now we're going to talk about Pope Adrian IV. I want you to pay attention to his name before he became Adrian IV, a pope. Nicholas Breakspear. Nicholas Breakspear, especially the Breakspear. All right, plenty of Nicholases around, but Breakspear, okay? Remember that name. Now, he announced a papal bull. It's all about papal bulls. I'm going to go over them in a little while. Called the Laudabilita. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but that's how I'm reading it. The Laudabilita. Now, what that did in 1157, okay, right, that allowed King Henry II, and I'm bringing him in now because I've got specific reasons to invade Ireland. Right, so it actually allowed him to invade Ireland, take over Ireland, and they've been doing it ever since as well. I'm not going to get into it, but anyway, you know, and that he literally allowed them to go in and invade Ireland, which was a fantastic country, you know, way advanced compared to England. But they King, what do you call it, Pope Adrian IV, he did the Laudabilita to allow King Henry II to invade and completely destroy and take over Ireland. But the thing about King Henry as well, which I want to bring into it, because, you know, it's all about, we get this term common law quite a lot, don't we? Common law. It comes from King Henry II. Now, he coined the term common law, and that was in 1154. And how did he do that? Well, what he did is, what, like, they had, imagine this, right, the 1154, it's not that long since they created, like, what they would have been in. Got to remember, these would all been speaking French, by the way, right? Henry and all they speak French now, right? Not Saxon, not English. What these people that are in charge of everything speak French because they've been in Normandy speaking French. Okay, so what they do is they now rule everything, and you've got one lord in one part of the country, and he's got his own rules. He's got his own laws. Then on this side of it, you've got another earl or a baron, whatever it is, and he's got his rules and his laws. And they're different because he's got his mood, he's got his mood, he's got his castle, he's got that castle. But he wanted it to be the same because he was getting annoyed and he was getting, like, petitioned, you know, by different people. So he went around the country, all right, and he made the law common to all. Not common law, right? So get away from these terms of saying, oh, I'm living under common law, I'm protected by common law. That's a nonsense. Get rid of these terms. Law is law, right? And what we're living in is contract, right? But I'm not going to get into that now. I just want to go in a bit of history. But that's what he did. He went across the country and he made the law the same for everyone. So it was common, as in, well, if it's the same for you, it's the same for me. It's a common law. It's a common thing. That's just what this means. All right, now I said I was going to talk about the papal bulls and the popes and, you know, jump ahead a couple of 100 years, but, you know, remember that thing about the common law, okay? Now, on these papal bulls, what we are living in and what we're still living in, and everything is fake, right? Your life is not what you think it is, and nothing is what you think it is. You need to investigate what's going on. The whole world is fake. We call it, or I call it, and a few other people that I've studied call it the dead earth hologram, because it's not real. Nothing is real. We are all fiction. Even you know, you can cut yourself and bleed. You're still a fiction somewhere. You're a piece of paper somewhere. And on that piece of paper is what rules the world, not you as the living man. We're in a dead earth hologram. And it was started, the whole, like, you know, where it's really taken into what's trusts. Everything is trusts. Everything is ruled by trusts. And later on, which, like, you know, we'll show you, not on this video, but I'll show you how to protect yourself through trusts. Okay? Because they actually control everything through trusts. You can either be controlled or protect yourself all through trusts. All right? So the first one was this guy, Pope Boniface VIII. He is hideous. He is horrible. I'm not sure if he actually started the Spanish Inquisition, but he was definitely part of it. And what he invented so many deaths by pain. It was incredible. It was all about making sure if you didn't die, right, then you weren't with God, and if you died, then you were okay with God, but you were dead. This guy was just a disgusting, torturing, hideous person. And I mean person because you'll hear me later on explain person, and he was a person. Right, his name, Pope Boniface, was Catani or Gattani, depends on which one you go through. Think of that name. Remember that name. I told you about Breakspear before. Now I'm telling you about Gattani or Catani, whichever one you want to take it from. Another name to relate and remember. All right. So he created the first and the largest ever trust, and it was in 1302, and it was called the Unam Santam. The Unam Santam. Now, it means one holy church. That's what it means in their language, but that's not what it was. He decided the whole world belonged to him. And he was going to put it all in trust, and he was going to look after it. And he was saying there he was going to keep it for everyone until Jesus Christ came back. This is what he was saying. So it's all in trust, and I'm keeping it. I'll protect it, and I'll look after it. And when Jesus Christ comes back, the Savior, whatever, and then he'll help me distribute it back out to mankind. You know. Anyway, so all land on earth belonged to him, right? And the only way that you could get through to heaven was through him, through the church. Okay, so this guy, though, by doing that, he also created a lot of enemies. One of them was called Philip the Fair. All right, supposed to have been a very attractive man who was King of France. All right, now the King of France was always fighting with Pope Boniface VIII. This is a good thing for us, even though it was hundreds of years ago, because they're still doing it now. They fight with each other all the time. These families, these pinnacles that are up there, that they think that they're better than us, but they still hate each other. Right? They're always power hungry. They're always greedy, and they're distrustworthy. They distrust each other. They hate each other just as much as they hate us, or at least close to anyway. Okay, so you know, and these were all part of it. You know, this is all fake. Everything, this royal family, they were all just placed there. But anyway, the Philip the Fair, King of France, well, he wanted rid of Boniface. He wanted to get him out of the way. All right. So he recruited like a guy called William de Nogaret. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Forgive me. Okay. And a guy called Sciarra. Can't say that. Sciarra Colonna. Now, Colonna was one of, you'll see it later on, was of the Conti and also the Columba or Coloni Columbia families. So have a look at that and how it ties in. And it's all, if you look at these names, it ties in with not only the families that we're talking about, the 13 families or tribes, whichever one you want to call it, but as it drops down to a lot of these mafia families that come from Sicily and Italy and everything that are now like completely control the United States, and they do, right? And it's all the same types of names. It's all coming from that family line. Okay, so anyway, it was in 1302, and this Pope Boniface, he set up the very first trust, which literally created it that everything belonged to them. This is where it's all starting to go to pieces. And then the next trust that we have is was done by 1455 and Romanus Pontifex. On the Romanus Pontifex, okay, that was done by Pope Nicholas V. Pope Nicholas V was a lovely guy. Not Pope Nicholas V. He also did another papal bull. This one, the Romanus Pontifex, that's a papal bull. And he also did another one called the Dum Diversas. The Dum Diversas. Now, the Dum Diversas, basically what he said was you can go to West Africa, and he did it for Alfonso V of Portugal. So this is another royal, okay, Alfonso V of Portugal. So that papal bull of Dum Diversas allowed Alfonso, this is what they say, oh no, it's God allowing me to do it. So he could invade West Africa, right, and take away what they called the Saracens, right? So this was the beginning of the slave trade, taking the slaves out of West Africa by Pope, you know, Nicholas V, all right, giving this guy permission to go and defeat the Saracens. Well, the Saracens was anybody who was foreign, all right, out of West Africa. And there we know, which was the creation of the West African slave trade. Now, the Romanus Pontifex that we're talking about, it was also the first Seta KV trust, Seta KV. Now, you must have heard of that, okay? That was the first Seta KV trust, and it deprived us of our land. You're born on the land, right? So they were saying that we were not allowed to be born on the land or to inherit our rights of being on the land. And it's the first time that they ever used the term perpetual remembrance. What that means is it can never be revoked. This is their word, by the way. It's not, you know, how we live, but this is what they create, and this is how they try and rule us. And they say it is a perpetual remembrance. It can never be stopped. All right, so then we're going to go on to the second. Remember, these are the crowns of Baal. You've got the 3 crowns of the Vatican, or the 3 crowns of Baal. So that was the first one, okay, which created the first Seta KV trust. Then you have the second crown of Baal, which was called the Attorney Regis. All right, the crown of Aragon, or the crown of the Commonwealth. And then this was the second Seta KV trust. There's the first one, and there's the second one, right? And this took, that first one there, we're just talking about the land. That deprived you of being on the land. That deprived you of having your inheritance on the land, because we're all given dominion of the land by God, by the Creator. That was telling you weren't allowed it. The second one, right, what that did is it actually took your body. So you've took your land, now they're taking your body, and they do it now through the birth certificate. Okay, the birth certificate, what happens with the birth certificate is they sell it, right? So you're sold to the Holy Roman Empire. Now, I'm not going to go, I've done videos on the birth certificate, so, you know, you can have a look at them. So I'm not going about it, but you were sold to the Holy Roman Empire as a Holy Roman person. Told you that before, didn't I? Remember the word person. Okay, so what is a person? From ancient Latin, ancient Greek. Person, persona, funnily enough, means mask wearer. Mask wearer. Or a slave. Okay, right? It's about like what they're saying is that it wasn't a real man, because you were playing something. You were acting. She would wear a mask to act, because you weren't you. You had to be somebody else. You had a different persona, which is an act, which is why we still are ruled now by acts and statutes, statutory legislation, acts of parliament, because it's acting, it's pretend, it's not real, it's fiction. All right, it's fiction. So this is all fiction. This is where it's starting from. So the next stage, or the next crown, is the third crown, which is done in 1537, and that was by Pope Paul III, who was a Farnese. Remember them names? We're talking about the 13 tribes, the 13 families. That was a Farnese. The third crown, 1537. Crown of the ecclesiastical see, right? Through, right through this papal bull, and the papal bull was called the Convocation. Oh, missed it again. Right, the papal bull was called the Convocation, but it was the third Sedicate v Trust through the baptism, and what they did, in their eyes, they were taking our soul. So go back to the beginning. The first thing they're saying is they're going to deprive us of having our rights of the land. They are taking our land, the man, woman. Then they were saying they were taking our body, right, with that birth certificate. Okay. And now they are saying they are taking it through the baptism, our soul. And they believe this, by the way. They 100% believe this. It's got nothing to do with what you believe. Don't worry about what you believe. They believe this 100%. Okay? So then we become cargo to them. Cargo without souls. So because we are cargo without souls, the temple bar, the bar association, what you would think would be solicitors, barristers, everything, judges, right? The bar is the British Accreditation Registry. They legally, and legal, not lawful, but legal, enforce maritime law because we are cargo without souls. We are things. They can treat us as property because we are not living, because we have no soul. Because they've took it through the baptism. Now, not everyone gets baptized anymore, but there's still the principle of how they do it. Okay, right? And this there is all run now. Look, and you know it is. It's maritime law. Now, let's go back to the Venetians. The Venetians again, because they're still controlling everything. And let's go back to the third crown, which was the Convocation Crown. Okay, the Convocation. And what the Venetians did, they actually awarded it to Henry VIII. Henry VIII of England. Okay. So there's a lot of infighting, like I've said, with all of these families and tribes, whatever you want to call them. So what they've done is they've actually been able to award it to Henry VIII, which gave him ecclesiastical authority to harvesting our souls. When he was given the Convocation Crown, right, everybody would have called it, I don't know if I've written it down, the Reformation of the Church, to try and break away from Rome, which is what they were trying to do it because they were infighting, fighting with each other. It was nothing to do with wanting to get a divorce. It was nothing to do with putting it, but he was getting made as the God's representative on earth instead of the Pope. It was Henry VIII. Well, why would that be? You know, why would it be some guy in which you've got to think about in England? It's got to be the smallest country in the world. So why would it be so important? You know, but they gave him the Convocation Crown, which gave him the ecclesiastical authority to harvest our souls. Doesn't that sound disgusting? Harvesting our souls. Now, Henry VIII, he created the first set of KV trust, okay, which created the first set of KV Act, I should say. So, Henry VIII created the first set of KV, not trust, but Act. Okay? And he pretended it was for the reformation of the church. But what he done is he took all the land and all the wealth from the church, but also from everyone else. And he took it all into trust. And it's still in trust now. And if you think I'm wrong, then go onto the land registry. If you live anywhere in the United Kingdom, and have a look at your land registry. You think you own your land. You think you've actually paid your mortgage off. You were a tenant because it's in trust. It's in trust because he did it, right? And he did it because he took the Convocation Crown. Because he took the Convocation Crown, he had the ecclesiastical authority to create another trust. And he put you all into a set of KV trust of his, which created the set of KV Act. Right, and he did it pretending to do the reformation of the church. Okay, now they took all the land and all the wealth of all the church. They did do that, but they did it to everyone else as well. Okay, unless you had a lordal title because you were awarded your land by William I, William the Conqueror, which they still hold today. All right, but again, that's a different video. Now. This is all done with a great help. I love this story because it's like this guy here, Thomas Cromwell. He helped him do all this, and he went around the whole country, Thomas Cromwell, and he destroyed churches. He took all the land, the amount of like what they would call priests and stuff that were murdered, dispossessed, killed, everything you can imagine. Thomas Cromwell did it all. He was hideous. All right, and now he. Came to his sticky end as well, though, because he introduced Henry VIII to Anne of Cleves, who Henry hated. I don't know, obviously I wasn't there, but this is definitely true. And what he'd done, right, after he had totally controlled the entire country, the entire wealth, took all of the wealth into a set of KV trust, set of KV Act for Henry, and then Henry chopped Thomas Cromwell's head off because he made him marry Anne Cleves. Anne of Cleves, which is like poetic justice, isn't it? All right, so that's how that happened. Now, remember we were talking about the crowns of Baal. The second one, right, that was taken, all right, from the Venetians, and it was given to King James I of England, King James Bible, Jamestown in America, okay, but also King the 6th of Scotland. Same guy. He was son of Mary, Queen of Scots. He was. Okay. And it was done when they did the union of the crowns, joining England and Scotland together under the false flag of the gunpowder plot of 1605. Remember that? Well, if you're not in the UK, the gunpowder plot of 1605, it was like Guy Fawkes. And when I was a kid, I used to wheel the barrow around in November with a dummy stuffed with straw, and we would build it, and then we would go penny for the guy, and we'd go around the pubs in the town, and they'd throw little coins into your wheelbarrow, and would wheel the guy, which we just thought was a toy, but later on you realize it was supposed to be a man. Guy Fawkes, and they would burn him on a huge big fire at the end of on November the 5th. But the truth is as well, they didn't even burn Guy Fawkes. That was his name, Guy Fawkes, and he was supposed to have done the gunpowder plot to blow up the Houses of Parliament. It didn't happen, man. I mean, it was all so planned. So, you know, it's like what we've gone through for 2 years, you know what I'm talking about, and what we're going through now, which is like a guy called Putin. So it never, honestly, it never changes. It's just all the same. But anyway, so what they've done was they've done the Union of the Crowns when they joined England to Scotland, and the second crown, because this is power, by the way, was given to James I. And with that power, that's how he actually went and he did invade, really, over to America and started setting up these colonies. Okay. Now, the next false flag, before we finish, because I've been going on for a long time now, was the Great Fire of London. Okay, which is like, well, let's bring this in with all of it. Okay, and then we'll finish. The Great Fire of London, 1666. It's a funny number. 666. And they blamed the whole thing on this guy called Thomas Fainall. Right? Thomas Fainall was the baker in Pudding Lane, if you haven't heard that story. So they had the huge fire that ripped the hole through London, killed loads of people. It was a Babylonian sacrifice. They were sacrificing the same as they've sacrificed thousands, like across like the whole world in the last 2 years, right? They did it in London, and they blamed this guy who was a baker, Thomas Fainall. You can like have some research on it if you like. Now, what they said was there, because like they created this huge fire, and they said there's a massive, and what they'd done was, when they were doing this in 1666, they passed the Seteke Act of 1666, which is still in force on the UK government website now. Now, you can go on and you can Google it. Seteke Act 1666. It's still in force. And this is when it was created. So what they said was that this huge fire caused such a problem that they didn't know who was alive and who was dead. They didn't know whose house was open, whose house was burnt down. So what they said was they're taking everything into trust, and everyone is dead until you come forward and declare yourself alive. And you have 7 years to do it. And after 7 years, if you haven't declared yourself alive, you are presumed dead at sea. Dead at sea. That's their term. And it's in the Seteke Act on the UK government website. It's on there, and it's still active today. And you try and ask them about it, and they go a load of rubbish about it. This is it. This is it. So this is how they control all of us through the Seteke Act, through the Seteke Trust and the Seteke Act 1666. Still in there, making us all dead persons at sea. So, as I had mentioned, the 1666 Seteke Act still on the government website, gov.uk. It's on there. Go check it out. You know, you'll see. Okay. And what they do, they still take it. They still take it, right? Right? They still take our land and our body and our soul in their minds. But they definitely take the land. Okay. Now, you can check the land registry. Go and have a look on the land registry. If you think you own your home and you've got it and you've got no mortgage and you think it's yours, I'm telling you now, you're a tenant. You're a tenant on the land because the land is in trust. It's in trust through the Seteke Trust. We do not own it. Check the DVLA. That means the Drivers Vehicle License Association or authority, whatever. You don't own your car. Your car is in trust to them. You don't own it. You are the registered keeper. Okay? And it's all done through the birth certificate. Now, have a look at the passport. Your passport will be a type. Everyone has a type of passport. Yours, or unless you're an aristocrat or a diplomat, I'm telling you now, it's called a P. What type of passport have you got? It is a P type because you are poor. You are a pauper. So I'm just going to finish off the last two acts and then leave it because it's a long video, a bit too long. Okay. 1697. And this is an act of Parliament. they did the Poor Apprentices Act. Now, an apprentice is not what you think. I'm going to get an apprentice. I'm going to work in the shipyard. I'm going to be apprentice woodworker. Apprentices were sex slaves. Apprentices were them days in 1697 were sex slaves, literally, being sold for sex, little boys, little girls. All right, and that's what they had, the 1697 Poor Apprentices Act. Okay, now what that said was, if you were poor, because of this act, you had to wear on your right shoulder, right, a badge with the letter P for poor or pauper or peasant, right? The same as your passport, the P. It's on there because you're a peasant, a pauper, or poor, all right? Even if you don't think you're poor, you kind of are compared to what they think of. Then in 1698, they did the Poor Act, okay? And on the Poor Act, they said if you had less than £10 a year lease for the land, it was like nobody had that. That was in 1698. That was like 95% of England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, right, were now classed as poor because of this. You had no chance of being anything except poor if you came under that £10 banner. And everyone was under the £10 banner, apart from the nobles that were put there by William the Conqueror in 1066, all tied together, right? And they also had the poor tax. And the poor tax, like, you could actually afford to pay anything. This is all tied into what you're doing still now today, and you're paying your council tax. It's a fact. Have a check of it. But also, have a look on your passport and have a look what type it is. And I'm telling you now, it's type P for pauper, for peasant, for being poor. All right? So anyway, hope you enjoyed it. That will do for now. Take care. See you on the next one.